Arrowsmith, Associate Director for Connectivity at IHS. IHS is a leading provider of information and analytics across a broad range of industries, spanning from geopolitical country risk right the way through to energy, oil and gas. I work as part of IHS Technology, which spans the entire value chain from semiconductors through to end devices, subscribers and services. I manage our connectivity team, covering all wireless, wired and power line communications technologies across diverse applications from consumer electronics through to smart metering, street lighting and healthcare.
Okay, my name is John Corbett. I represent the InOcean Alliance today. And we represent an alliance of people who all are using InOcean's technology. InOcean's technology is really based around energy harvesting, using heat, light in motion in order to power up devices. So we're very interested in shortwave radios with very, very low power.
I'm Peter Judge. I edit Tech Week Europe. We're a technology news site for professionals. We cover everything from the Internet of Things all the way up to big data and data centers.
I'm Avi Barel, Director of Business Development at the ULE Alliance. ULE Alliance promotes ultra-low energy tech for home automation, home security, and energy control.
I'm William Webb, CEO of the Waitlist SIG. Waitlist is a not-for-profit standards body which has been established to produce the specification for a wide area machine-to-machine connectivity solution.
My name is Martin Engdahl. I work as a product strategy manager at Short Range Radio at the wireless and module and chipmaker u-blox. u-blox makes also GNSS and cellular modules and modems.
Welcome everybody to the 2014 European IncisorTV Wireless Roundtable. We've been running this program for 3.5 years now, and each time we've organised our meetings around the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. But of course not everybody gets to Las Vegas. Many people operate in Europe and Asia, and so now we've extended the program to include new events. This is the first of those, and we're talking in London today. I'm going to introduce Lisa Arrowsmith, our co-host to this event, and Lisa is going to actually launch the conversation with the first question for the group. So Lisa.
Thank you, Vince. So I'm very pleased to once again be co-hosting this event with Incisor, and I'd also like to thank all of our participants for joining us today. I'd like to get things started by looking back over the last 6 months since the previous roundtable. Can you tell me a little bit about what you think are some of the key developments or announcements that we've heard around wireless or the Internet of Things that have really made an impact to you?
I think some of the biggest impacts we're starting to see, Internet of Things is obviously the buzzword at the moment, but more down towards what are connective objects. So machine to machine's been the big buzzword for quite some time, and InOcean's been quite heavily involved in that. But we're now seeing a bigger trend now towards home automation and personal automation almost, where we're seeing big requirements. Apple's announcement, for instance, has been quite key to that. We've just seen Archos actually step up and actually beat Apple to the mark with a whole range of devices. So, this is now becoming quite a key area for us. And from our point of view, one of the biggest interesting areas is there's going to be so many of these devices. We think people would prefer not to have them battery powered, so having energy harvesting devices would actually be very key to that, and we're seeing a big trend towards how we can do that, how we can implement that.
Okay, there are actually two noticeable things that I can talk about. It's one of them is actually entrance of the giants to the area of the home automation and the Internet of Things. Apple is one of them. Google acquiring Nest, another one, and Nest actually just yesterday acquired another company, and this along with other giants in the US like AT&T and Comcast, who are already deploying that. I think we are already seeing that this is kind of picking up and giants entering the market. So this is I think an important development. One note that I would like to make that I wish we could see similar activity in Europe also.
So you're saying that your feeling is that most of this is happening in the US at the moment?
Most the public-facing activities that we hear about it, announcements it's happening in the US, but I know that I believe that there are lots of activity in Europe in a different area, in standardization organizations, in the other activities and related activities. So maybe there is a difference in the character of the things that are happening, but things are happening in Europe definitely.
So, William, you very much have a finger on the pulse of standardisation activity. What's your observation on that?
I think that's right, and I also agree with the observations from John and Avi that the entry of the giants has been a big change in the last 6 months. Looking at the standards area, actually one thing that I've noticed over the last 6 months has been the realisation by the cellular operators that they don't really have a good solution for the Internet of Things. If you go back a year or two, the cellular operators, I think, were fairly convinced that they could use their GPRS solutions to deliver widespread connectivity. But over the last 6 months, a number of them have been questioning that. A number have been looking at 5G as a vehicle for integrating the Internet of Things, which of course pushes their timescales right out, and they've been wondering how they're going to deal with that. And at the same time, we see the entry of other operators. For example, Sigfox in Europe has been very strong in building networks around Europe in competition with the cellular operators. And for me, that's the big change in the last 6 months. The cellular operators starting to realise that they can't play in this space unless they do something different from what they do now.
Do you think that they've actually got to a stage where they'll start doing something about that, or still thinking about doing something about that?
At the moment, they're still thinking about it, but I would imagine that the activities of companies like Sigfox are really starting to become a wake-up call for them. Yeah. And I would expect to see some of the more innovative cellular operators start to do something in the next year or two. Quite what that something will be, I think, is unclear, but I suspect that they are starting to realise that they need to change from the existing approach of just assuming that they can dominate that area through the connectivity solutions they have already.
And do you think the smaller network operators like the Sigfoxes of this world, will they be working really hard to try and plug the gap at the moment until the major operators have a solution? Yes,
I think they see a window of opportunity. Quite where they're going, I think, remains to be seen. We talked just a moment ago about takeovers, and of course one possibility is that those kind of companies simply get bought out by the Vodafones or the Telefonicas of this world, and that could be a very attractive exit strategy for them. But I guess in the interim they're trying to build as fast as they can some kind of a toehold in this market space before the big players really start to invest heavily.
Sure, Pete.
I wonder if we should be a bit cautious about the media excitement around the Internet of Things and the related issue of wearable technology, connected home, etc. I can see that this is what the vendors and the operators want to happen because everybody's now got phones, so they need something else to sell us. At the consumer level, I don't know, but I'm sure Lisa can tell us. I don't know how big the consumer demand is for this stuff, and I'm wondering if actually, the excitement of the last 6 months might now give way to a longer, slower period where the reality of big industrial and urban, government-backed projects take a long while to actually happen, and the consumer stuff sort of just crackles a bit and becomes a little bit, people get bored with it.
Well, as our representative of the media, are you offering to wind yourself back here?
Sorry, you can assume that's a big apology for all the coverage we've given to Google Glass and the like.
So for me, I think that the conversation's really moved on in the last 6 months. When we talked to companies 6 months ago, the real question was, how big is this Internet of Things phenomenon going to be? What are the numbers? What's going to drive this? Whereas now, the conversation's changed and it's shifted to really an understanding of, okay, well, what are the services that we need to be providing to actually drive this Internet of Things, whether it's from an industrial perspective, whether it's a consumer perspective. And I think that's going to really help to actually open this up, is that renewed focus in, we know devices are going to be connected, but what problems are we actually solving, and what kind of services can we provide that are going to really increase that adoption through the future?
But can I?
Of course, yeah.
Basically, I think this is connected to each other. I was talking about giants entering and into the market, and this is an important move. But I think that what Peter said, and I absolutely agree with you, that it's not the entrance is important. It's for them to stay in the market for a long time and support and build the market. Take a look at tablet. Okay, there was no major company who didn't build a tablet. Okay, everybody entered, but only few remained. And I think that we need to make sure that the value that is delivered to the people who are standing at the end, at the edge of the Internet of Things, is good enough and strong enough that this will be really a continuous business and not a spike and then it will go away. Like many
I think
others
you're right. I
unfortunately.
think I think you struck the value is the important thing.
Yes.
I think you've got a break between what is consumer and what is commercial. I think the commercial area that's fine. I think the value is there, but at the domestic level, then I think the value can be the issue. And have you got the right thing for the right job? And is it easy to put in? I mean, is that connectivity easy to do? These are all important things.
I agree entirely with that. I think you can see very clear productivity gains in many industrial applications, from smart metering to measuring water flow in pipes and all sorts of things like that, where there's no need to ask what's the application. The application is simply you save money by putting this stuff in. It's very clear and very obvious. In the consumer space, it's far less obvious, and we've seen all these Fitbit kind of devices, but there's a question now as to whether people are starting to get bored with those. They've worn them for a few months and they've watched them for a bit. And
Exactly, that's right. Yeah.
And it does seem to me as well, even things like the thermostat, people are struggling desperately hard to find some reason why you need this. And the recent Nest announcement, when your car's 30 minutes away, it can tell your house that you're going to be there and you can turn the heating on.
Yeah.
Is that really necessary?
Exactly.
Yeah. I would like to comment on that one, if possible. What I think is missing here in this kind of discussion is, what is it for? Why Internet of Things? Everybody is jumped the train, and I think most companies understood that 90% of the market is untouched. It's either disconnected or wired connected today. I think for tomorrow people say, okay, everything should be connected, but why? And I think they are missing the main reason. Today, data is locally processed out in the end nodes. Disconnected, you do offline processing. You don't utilize the possibility when all data is connected in big data, where you can combine, predict, look into the historical data and do predictions for the future. And you can also start using algorithms that's not possible to do locally. So if everything is connected, all data is propagating up to the cloud, then the magic will happen. And we don't today know what applications that will be developed based on all this information. And this is something that's really a game changer. Why Internet of Things is so important is that we don't do the things we used to do.
No, understood. But before we can get to that stage, and maybe we didn't expect to get to this important point this early in the conversation, but isn't it the case that for that to happen, the ability to build the Internet of Things is based around a need to have something that is as standardized and as ubiquitous as, for example, the Internet is? At the moment, the Internet of Things is still being developed around lots of different standards, ways of doing things. And while that continues to be the case, it can never be truly ubiquitous. And for it to happen globally and on a huge scale, it all has to be done the same way, surely, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and I think history shows us that in the world of wireless connectivity, there is only typically one dominant standard in each particular space. So if you take personal area, it's Bluetooth. If you take the local network, it's Wi-Fi. The wider network, it's cellular, and there have been in the past US versus the rest of the world standards, but even those have coalesced into one now. And if we look at trigger points that have enabled things to happen, the personal area network happened when companies got together and agreed the Bluetooth standard rather than all trying to have their own different options. Even in the world of mobile data, that was really triggered by Apple in the App Store, which wasn't an open standard, but nevertheless it was something everyone could coalesce around and say, we're going to do this. And it does seem to me that in the world of the Internet of Things right now, we have a huge plethora of both standards bodies and proprietary technologies. And if you're the hypothetical washing machine manufacturer in China and you want to build some sort of connectivity into your washing machine, what chip do you put into it? Do you put in Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, cellular, power line communications, depth, weightless, all of those in the hope that one of them is going to connect somehow? Clearly it's a non-starter until it's completely obvious to that washing machine manufacturer that, of course, it's an Internet of Things, we put in that chip, then it's difficult for this to take off, I think.
Yeah, I think that is the biggest issue. And we've sort of found it a bit ourselves already in the commercial space, but it's all down to the gateway from our point of view. I mean, our products have to coexist with a gateway, whatever, because they're energy harvesting. They sit off most of the time, so they need something that's powered. So the gateway's ideal for that. So we've, from the commercial point, there's always been a standard for a gateway, KNX, BACnet, one of those things. Domestically, I think you've come to the right point. There needs to be some form of open standard at the gateway point, probably, by which everybody can talk to. Now, from the wireless point of view, there's a discussion then, what should the shortwave range wireless be? But should the gateway be able to talk to all of those? Probably. In fact, already, in some of the products that we're seeing, there are in Ocean ones, there's Bluetooth, Zigbee, and they all talk to the same gateway. And then there's an open gateway initiative clearly around all that opens up the gateway itself and maybe virtualizes it. So that's something that we've seen. I don't know if anybody else has seen a similar thing.
Yeah, we see the same thing.
Yeah.
It's that the gateway is a key component in the Internet of Things strategy, and there will be no dominant technology in the short-range radio that will solve all the problems. There will be a number that will be the most important ones, and these ones are probably the one that will be sorted out quite soon or in the coming years. Yeah. But the gateway concept, for sure, that's important as a translator.
Yeah, exactly, it's a translator. Yeah.
Would we say it's that wireless technology, and probably short-range wireless technology in particular, is absolutely intrinsic to establishing machine-to-machine communication in the Internet of Things, though?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Based on my experience in deployment of cables, it's the costs is enormous, and things are moving around over time.
So I would question that a little. So if we go back to let's say the washing machine, and let's say the manufacturer decides that it's valuable to offer some kind of connectivity because they can offer maintenance updates, they can schedule washing when the sun's shining and so the solar power is being generated or whatever, then you might argue, well, it's in the home, therefore it should have a short-range connectivity to a home hub. But then that's quite complicated. So how are they going to make sure that it's the right home hub that it's paired to? How are they going to put in some kind of password to make sure that pairing works correctly? What happens if the home hub is turned off, just at the point when the sun's starting to shine, all these other kind of things? Why not simply connect that directly back to an external network, like a cellular system or a weightless system, and then there's no difficulty in setting it up, there's no discoverability difficulty, and the whole thing is fetched beyond the control of one network operator that can make sure it works perfectly. Now, as long as the cost overhead for that is not significant, I would argue that's a better approach to all these kind of things. Take them straight up to the cloud, where there's some kind of central control and processing can take place, rather than try and find out what the home hub is and how to connect to it, and is it still working, and has Granny forgotten to turn it on today or not.
So an actual wireless connection to something outside the house, rather than going through. Yeah.
And in a way, it's no different from using your cell phone when you're in the home. You could argue, what's the point in doing that? Because you've got used to it. You could use a DECT phone to your home point, but you use the cell phone because it's simple, it's convenient, it's easy. Everything's just there and you can do it. And even though a local connection would be apparently more obvious to use then.
So just to play sort of devil's advocate on that a little bit, we've seen quite a lot of interest in the appliance manufacturer example from those companies looking towards Wi-Fi to provide something that's future-proof as a standard. It connects directly into people's existing routers or routers, and you generally, unless the power goes down, there's not really a problem, and if the power goes down, you're probably not going to be able to use your washing machine anyway. What would you say would be the advantage of using something like weightless over an existing ubiquitous standard like Wi-Fi?
The key advantage is the setup phase. So the problem with Wi-Fi is you've got to identify the right network, because in my house I can see many Wi-Fi networks and only one of those is mine. And then you've got some way to get the password involved in that. And my Wi-Fi network password is changed periodically, so I get a new router or whatever, so each time I do that, that's going to have to be changed through the washing machine. And then you've got to somehow get that connectivity from the washing machine back to the manufacturer for data that they want to know. So the washing machine's got to be able to tunnel its way through all these different kinds of things. And my experience of connecting things like wireless printers to my Wi-Fi network is that the whole thing needs to be turned on and off at least once a day in order for that connectivity to be maintained.
I want to be a different devil's advocate. I mean, why is this washing machine connected wirelessly anyway? It's got to be connected to the power, and in the same building you've got a router that's also connected to the power. Why aren't they connected over some nice standard power line connection?
And of course that's an approach that has been adopted in the past. So BT Vision tried to make use of power line communications in the home, and it can work, but the problem is what happens if you've got other things also trying to use power line communication in the home. They'll all start interfering with each other, and that can be a significant issue. So you can't be sure that's going to work necessarily, and it does mean you have to sell a power line hub with your washing machine as well. So every washing machine has to come with a power line hub unless everyone's got one, which they haven't. So there's that kind of issue as well that takes place, and that clearly is a real problem. Do you want to start plugging in extra hubs for every appliance that you buy? Not really.
And also you mentioned the idea of use a standard power line communication, but which standard? We've got so many. Yes. There was the HomePlug Green Fi, which seemed designed for these types of applications. You've got things like Instian, which is history in the home automation space, and even then you're facing the same or similar challenges to some of those that you found in wireless, where you're going to have things that won't always talk to each other, and the consumer's not necessarily going to understand why not.
True. I was deliberately begging that. I do in my own home have two separate power line pairs, which seem to work all right. Fingers crossed.
I believe that maybe washing machine is not the best representation of the Internet of Things. The more smaller and more mobile devices would be actually much bigger market in terms of the volume. Unit volumes, and definitely I believe that wireless is essential for this type of networks, and this is one of the foundations actually of the ULE and trying to use DECT for home automation, because you have already tens of millions of home gateways which are DECT enabled, and they can speak ULE as of today with just a simple software upgrade, and you can now connect devices at home. There may be the other technologies will have other values in other uses, and etc. So basically you would need wireless, and I believe that the Internet of Things cannot live without wireless.
Okay, but whichever way this pans out, for a period of time it's going to be necessary for the short-range wireless industry to marry with the wide area network operators.
Correct. Yes.
Is that going to be a happy marriage?
I think it's a necessity. I think there's no way that we could survive, anybody could survive without the two married together very happily in some form of open environment, some agreed environment. I think we've already mentioned that there's going to be more than one radio. There'll be an Ocean one, there'll be a Bluetooth one, there could be a Zigbee one, could be lots of different radios. And so the open environment has to be able to take that and just translate it and pass it through.
But is anybody doing the work to knit that together? Because at the moment it's two very different businesses, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. You're right.
I think from standardization point of view, and the different working groups and alliances and SIGs and so on I think they're realizing this right now, and some of them are probably putting a lot of people in to sort out how to do this, because if you don't find a standardized way to exchange information when it has left the radio, because the radio is just the last transport. It's what happens with information after that point. That must be standardized. Then we can allow different kind of radio technologies. And from my experience, it will not be maybe the best technology. It's the technology that has the most, I would say, if you talk about radio technology as such, the most commercial footprint to get the price down, like Bluetooth Low Energy. They have found a killer application. They are now mass deployed, prices per unit is down, so they will be one player. If all the technologies can be even better, but have more characteristics that make them more suitable for Internet of Things, but they need to find a killer application.
And there are standards being developed in this space. I think the most obvious one is the 1M2M standard, which is designed effectively to multiplex together lots of different connectivity solutions into one platform, above which you can have a standard application-facing space. And there's also things like lightweight M2M at the moment that the OMA is standardising, that tries to provide a consistent application and profile framework that can work across multiple underlying bearers. And I think actually that approach, interestingly, means that the wide area networks, the mobile operators and so on, don't need to work with the short range systems at all. So in the same way that actually my mobile phone can work on a cellular network and on my home Wi-Fi network, and that differentiation has nothing to do with the cellular operators. I program my phone to use that Wi-Fi network when I'm there, so it's the phone that has that intelligence, not the cellular operators. I think we'll see the same thing happening in the Internet of Things, that the devices will say, need to use cellular now because that's the only connectivity, or look, I can use short-range wireless and tunnel through there. And actually the mobile operators may have no concept of whether that device is on one or the other particularly. It's just a bit pipe transport that they provide.
They prefer you did your voice over their network though.
Well, yes, although interestingly, just recently we've seen announcements for voice over Wi-Fi support from 3 and other entities. I think they're starting to understand that actually they can't hold back the tide.
Their shares being beaten.
The reality here.
Exactly. And also, of course, 4G doesn't actually do voice very well, so in some respects it helps them if they can pass the voice off to a completely different system.
Yes, that's right.
This is quite unusual to see, isn't it? Because for such a long time, all the operators seem to have held all the power, and that's changing.
It is changing significantly, actually, and I think it's a slow realisation because, of course, they're large entities. They make a lot of money. They're some of the biggest companies in the country. But if you go back 25 years, imagine the world where BT was so dominant and Vodafone popped up, and the thought that Vodafone could actually be bigger than BT at one day seemed ridiculous. But I think we're now at a tipping point where actually the cellular operators are not the single dominant players in this space, and those involved, for example, in the whole Wi-Fi arena have a lot more power, a lot more say, as do the Googles and the Microsofts and others of this world that provide other types of connectivity like Skype and that kind of thing.
What I thought was really interesting, Avi, is when you mentioned, there's going to be these different sort of buckets of solutions and not necessarily the same technology that needs to be the primary solution in each of them. So I'd be interested to hear a bit more about what you think are the key characteristics that short-range wireless technologies need to exhibit in the Internet of Things. Are there commonalities that span across the whole of the Internet of Things landscape, and how does it vary by these different application areas?
My experience is that ease of deployment. We share that, some of us, that the challenges by having a very complicated deployment procedure will make some of these technologies very, very hard to deploy for mass deployment. And the other thing is end-to-end security. How do we guarantee that the data is protected and that that it reaches the right device? How can you combine these? And also the final thing that I've realized is the utilization of the radio space. How can you make sure that you communicate as quick as possible and then are silent for as long as possible to make sure that you allow other technologies to utilize the radio space? And combining all these are quite a challenge.
We also share that issue. And we certainly see a big space for the shortwave radio being very, very ultra low power. In our experience, the biggest issue that we're starting to see is the number of batteries that's going to require. So we obviously have energy harvesting as being the number one saviour of that issue. And we believe that if we couple the energy harvesting side of it with the ease of connectivity, and again, actually, sort of back to the gateway thing, if the gateway could control some of that connectivity, because we have a remote learn capability in most of our devices, that gets over some of that issue as well. So, lack of batteries, ease of just plugging a device in or just sticking it to a wall is a big benefit.
Of the other short-range wireless technologies, which do we feel is demonstrating the best set of characteristics to make inroads into the Internet of Things? Martin, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say for the time being, we think Bluetooth Low Energy answers a lot of these questions, and we have seen some major progress since the last roundtable with mesh networking capabilities presented. There are of course, things that can be improved. That's for all technologies, but for the time being, we see a very wide acceptance in the market for that technology, as it's robust, it's low power, it's very easy to deploy, and has the mass market deployment in the mobile phone and computer and tablets.
We're hearing about mesh networking with Bluetooth Low Energy. Is that a reality? Are people implementing that now, or are we still at a talking about it phase?
I think it's more talking about it phase right now. So, but I've seen it live and demonstrated. So it surely works. But it's like showing that you can do it.
Yeah.
It's more like that. Okay, then it's if needed you can do it.
Yeah,
but
almost you have to be
not
able to answer the question. Well,
Yes.
Bluetooth Low Energy doesn't do mesh networking, does it? And now you can say, well, yes, it does. Whether people want to do it's another matter, but it's a tick box, I guess.
So I think I'd push back a bit on the idea that there's going to be multiple wireless technologies in this space. I mean, we certainly have multiple wireless technologies now, but to my point, if you look at every other area of wireless, there is one single dominant technology, because you get to a point where the mix of economies of scale and guaranteed connectivity and everything else essentially tip you over the edge. So even if that technology is not ideal for a range of applications, you tend to use it still. And we use Wi-Fi for all sorts of things that Wi-Fi was never invented for, and it's far from ideal for.
Yeah.
But it's there, and it's simple, and it's cheap. And so it seems to me that we will get to a situation where one of these technologies becomes the clear tipping point winner. And quite how we get there, I'm not sure, but it may be that Apple build it into every iPhone, and suddenly that becomes the standard that becomes accepted more widely, or that kind of thing. And so I do expect to see one emerge. It's not clear quite which one, but actually I think I would agree with Martin. If I had to point to one, it's more likely to be Bluetooth, because the low energy system is designed very well for this situation, and the chipset volumes are huge and are going into every mobile phone and many other devices, and will probably be built into home hubs sometime soon. But I think the jury's still out on that one.
So it could be that as GSM made cellular phone use ubiquitous, I think it's fair to say that, and the internet has done what it's done for connectivity, Bluetooth Low Energy could be that standard. Is that what we're actually moving towards?
Well,
Others will have different views.
I would hope they would have different views. That's why we're all sitting around this table.
I have a different approach. I think that the mesh is sometimes considered as a advantage or attribute by itself. I think that it's a problem, a solution to the problem, and solution to the problem of the short range, and it actually brings some of the major limitations. For example, it's very difficult to build a mesh network in a do-it-yourself manner. You would need probably the professional installers. That means that cost and actually a problem for the high volume deployment and ubiquitous deployment, etc. And if you have a technology that you do not need mesh, you do not need repeaters, your range is good enough that you can build the home or building network without any mesh, just a single gateway and connected to the device. It's the simplest installation. Then it makes actually the cost of ownership lowest. And we are talking about the consumer devices. I think it's a very important thing. So I tend to say that mesh is a solution to a problem that in case of ULE does not exist. Okay, and so you better be without a problem rather than with a solution to a problem.
I have one comment regarding Bluetooth Low Energy. The general perception of the range experience with Bluetooth Low Energy is many times that you expect a low energy Bluetooth device to have very short range. But I myself been doing live tests with very good range in buildings. We talk about 50 meters, 100 meters. You can leave the building and still communicate. So if you reduce the mesh need to maybe you have one or two multi-radio devices that can bridge between low energy and maybe go to Wi-Fi or something else, or another long-range technology like cellular or something, then you can be somewhere in these two worlds at the same time. You maybe have 20 or 50 Bluetooth Low Energy nodes, then you have a small multi-radio device talking to these devices, and then talk Wi-Fi to the backbone or some other long-range technology. And then you have some kind of radio gateway solving that kind of problem.
Well, with three standards bodies represented around this table, this could be a little bit contentious. But which SIG, forum or alliance or other organisation seems to be doing the best job of preparing itself to enter the Internet of Things marketplace, do we feel? I guess, William, you take Weightless.
Yes. Well, I think one of the key differentiations of Weightless is it's set up purely for the Internet of Things. So if we look at most entities, they've taken an existing solution that was designed for something quite different, and they've tried to adapt it for the Internet of Things. And adapting something has the advantage, of course, that you build on economies of scale, but the disadvantage that you're starting from the point that's not really the right starting point. You're not taking a clean sheet of paper and saying, how's this going to look? So I would hope that Weightless has actually delivered something that is really designed very specifically exactly for the Internet of Things, because that was the whole reason for setting it up in the first place and delivering against that. And where I see some bodies that are not doing so well, for example, I think Wi-Fi is struggling to adapt itself to the Internet of Things because it has a massive market for developing ever higher data rate solutions in ever higher frequency bands. Yeah. And that's where the vendors are mainly heading, quite rightly, because that's where their customers are wanting to go. And so the whole idea of Internet of Things, I think, is a bit of a diversion for that kind of body. Others, I think, are doing somewhat better because they're more aligned to that particular market space from their starting point than places like Wi-Fi.
Sure. Martin, you have close connections with both the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth marketplaces. u-blox is active in both areas. What are your observations on the way the two technologies and their organisations are addressing this?
I would say I see some progress, at least in that they understand that something has to be done and that they need to work on this, because the understanding about the market potential and that the technology will be it's very, very key to be good at in the Internet of Things.
Any other observations?
Well, I can talk about for Alliance what we are doing, and actually we at Alliance are taking certain steps in order to support the fast proliferation of our technology. Mainly, we have funded development of common software, and we are going to make that software publicly available. Another thing is that we are going to support the IP connectivity, meaning that IP termination can be in the node, in the smoke sensor. We'll have IP connectivity directly to through the gateway, of course. We are adding other features that are inherent to that. For example, the voice profiles. This is something that actually in the next few days we expect that the specification will be released from Etsy. And this is putting actually the really aside from other technologies, other short-range wireless technologies, our ability to deliver voice in addition to data and in parallel to data available.
Okay, well, a lot of the conversation that we've had, I'm just coming to you actually, Peter, as it happens, because a lot of the conversation around this table is looking at this from the industry point of view. But what sort of feedback is coming back from the enterprise and major corporations out there about the IoT opportunity?
I suppose the meta question here, the high level question really is, how long will this period of utter confusion go on for? How useful will it be in terms of some kind of evolutionary process producing something better than might otherwise happen? And in 5 years' time, will we be looking back on 5 wasted years, or will we be looking back on 5 years during which something so amazingly evolutionary happened that we're really glad that we went through the process?
Well, this is perfect, because I was going to say, it leads us to the question, what is the real timescale for the Internet of Things? Because from the way this conversation's been going today, we seem to be agreeing around the table that there is going to be a considerably longer period of consolidation than some people would like to think. Because there are people telling us that the Internet of Things is here now, or if it's not here today, it's going to be here tomorrow, and we need to be doing it now. And yet, we can see through this conversation alone that there is so much work that needs to be done to find the tipping points, the GSM equivalents, the Internet equivalents for the Internet of Things. that it probably isn't going to be 2015 or 2017. It may be 2025. I don't know. What
Well,
would you...
I think you've hit a very interesting point. You said use case, and I think that's the biggest issue. Everybody's bandmarked this IoT idea, but what is it connected? Anything can be connected to the internet if you've got something electronic that can translate it. I think you've got to look at the use case.
My take is actually we focus rather a lot on the consumer and the home space.
Yeah.
And of course, the Internet of Things has about 7 or 8 of these kind of spaces that you can tick off: healthcare and transportation, logistics, asset management, industrial Internet side of things. And it seems to me actually the consumer space is probably going to be one of the last ones that we tick off for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because doing anything in a home is very difficult because it involves changing the fabric of the home. So if you want to have a front door that you can automatically unlock, you've got to get power to that front door, you've got to change the locking system, you've got to do a whole load of stuff that homeowners frankly are not interested in. They're far more interested in buying a 55-inch flat screen TV than they are in implementing an advanced locking system for their front door. So the sort of stuff that requires a change to the fabric of the home in any shape or form, even if that be as simple as changing the thermostat, isn't really going to happen until it becomes the sort of thing that you just do automatically because it's cheap and ubiquitous. It seems to me actually that the key cases are the industrial ones that save money, that involve productivity gains. And of course already there's been SCADA control systems for decades, and what we're seeing is more and more of those kind of things being implemented. Yeah.
I would absolutely agree. I mean, I think we've seen a lot of the value that can come out from combining those verticals when we look at things like smart city implementations, where you have the energy systems communicating with the pollution systems, air quality systems, right the way across to things like traffic management, and actually collectively using all that data towards a common purpose. But I think that also raises another issue around the Internet of Things, is even if we've settled this debate of what communications technologies to use, there's companies out there that are equipping their solutions with a communications technology, collecting all this great data, and they don't necessarily have the background or the expertise to then understand how to necessarily use that data.
From my perspective, I've been thinking about what will drive this deployment, what will speed it up. And one thing is that you today do local data processing, and as you would like to do more and more advanced algorithms in the end nodes, I won't mention a certain example, but if you would like to do a lot of data processing, you measure something and you would like to present the result. If you can gain all the processing power from the cloud, then you need a connectivity for that device. But then you can also lower the price of the unit itself by having a smaller microcontroller, less memory, less processing power, smaller batteries. You just collect the data, send it to the cloud, get it processed, and get the result back locally. But what also will change, and this will be the economical incentive, is that you go from buying a product one-off to a reoccurring revenue model where you subscribe for a service. As long as you pay, you get the result. When you don't pay, you stop getting the results.
So I think we seem to be in sort of broad agreement that we're not going to see all of the Internet of Things at once, and that in the short term it's going to be driven by certain vertical applications. But I'd be interested to hear what you think are the vertical applications that are driving the really exciting short-term opportunities, and which you think will be longer-term goals.
So it seems to me, as I said, it's kind of the industrial productivity ones drive the short term for a few reasons. First of all, because you don't have to be visionary there. It's a simple business case thing. If I deploy a flow rate meter in my pipes, then I can save X amount on maintenance and on leakage. So nobody has to kind of imagine that something's going to happen, build it and they will come. That doesn't have to take place. And then secondly, the system can be all under the control of one entity. So you don't have to hope that one part of the business buys the same technology as the other part. You simply say, we're going to put in technology X and it's going to do the whole thing. And these companies are big enough to make it worthwhile. So my suspicion is actually it'll be that kind of thing that will drive it. And certainly we see smart metering deployments taking place now on fairly large scale, mostly because governments have mandated it, but nevertheless that's a specific driver that will push these things forwards. So that seems to me a core area. Another area of significant interest is also the whole smart city space, which is a bit more nebulous. There's not a clear productivity gain there necessarily, but there are a number of applications you can point to, like street lighting and parking and so on, that individually seem to make some kind of sense. And we're seeing, I think somebody pointed out, there's over 100 smart city demonstrators around the world now, a lot of interest and a lot of movement in that area. The ones that I think are really could change the world are the ones that take a lot longer, and in particular I could point to healthcare, where there's massive potential benefits from connecting up everything from things that monitor your vital signs to your pillbox and your scales and other such things. But the healthcare world is necessarily one that's very slow moving because it's very cautious, very risk averse. There's all sorts of different certifications and approval processes that are needed that can often take years, if not decades. And the whole IT systems that are involved there are humongously big and desperately difficult to change in any way, shape or form. So the ones that I think are the really exciting ones, unfortunately, are the ones that I think are going to be 5 to 10 years away before we see any real movement in that space.
I think you mentioned healthcare, and I think the area where you don't quite get the same certification issues is the assisted learning area, which is more like a domestic version of healthcare. We're certainly seeing a trend that way, if you want to call that an Internet of Things, because it does actually talk through a gateway. We have things like mattress sensors that detect people moving, and so certainly I think assisted living is something that's, well, it's probably actually already with us, right? Is there something? Yeah, I mean, there are already assisted learning packages, not necessarily in ocean ones, but other ones as well. So I think that's already ongoing.
I agree.
I think the other one that is already with us, because frankly we already do it, is the energy saving area. We're certainly seeing an awful lot of implementations. Frankly, more again, as I already mentioned, at the commercial level, but it's extending now down into the domestic level. And we've also seen other things like Hive, Nest, and all those bits and bobs which go around that. So I think that those are with us. I think they're trending upwards.
The contenders to provide this Internet of Things connectivity come from a whole range of backgrounds. Some of them are based in consumer development, some are based in industrial, others. Personal area networking, connecting computers, these are all the technologies that are now being crowbarred into the Internet of Things. But is it possible that one completely new standard, absolutely designed to make the Internet of Things happen, could replace everything that we have today?
I would say yes, of course, because that's the premise on which Waitlist is founded, so clearly I would believe that. And I would point to things like Bluetooth effectively coming along and replacing a plethora of different short-range personal area network technologies, to the extent that you wouldn't ever think of using anything apart from Bluetooth for a personal area networking solution today. So I think history shows us that it can happen, but equally history shows us that there's probably only one success for every 10 attempts to do something like that. So I think it's far from guaranteed, and it's an extremely difficult and challenging thing to bring about. Not technically, because it's easy to design technically a solution that works well, but to coalesce global industries around one particular vision and standard is a tremendously hard thing to do.
Yeah, I think that standard's going to be pulled by something major, a Google, an Apple. So if that coalesces, we talked about this coalescent idea. If it does coalesce around an idea, then you're right, it will do that.
But the challenge with such a technology is to address the extreme use cases, from extreme low power transmitting once a day to high definition streaming video. How to solve that in the same kind of fashion in one standard that try to I would say gap over too much to.
I mean, you already see the need for in an in-home scenario, the need for a camera and a temperature sensor. I mean, they're completely different objects.
But I think to some degree, the applications start to meld to fit what they have available to them. So, if a technology were to emerge, let's say like Waitlist, it's incredibly good at the low data rate stuff, but it doesn't do streaming CCTV so well. So you have a choice then. If you're a streaming CCTV camera manufacturer, either you just use cellular, or you do something cleverer. So you only send data when some trigger event occurs, and you compress that data and you send it over a low bandwidth connectivity solution, because it's cheap and easy to do that, rather than trying to just stream everything. In the same way that we don't see people just using cellular to stream every video connection they might want to stream because it's too expensive and it just doesn't work. They adapt their behaviour in such a way that home security cameras do just that kind of thing. They wait until they're triggered, they capture a small amount of compressed video and they send a few frames to a handset. I think we'll see applications actually changing to adapt themselves to the underlying bearer technology.
Yes, like a TV service that only shows you the goals.
Yes, if there are any.
It'll always be off then.
So, I mean, I think we've seen technologies evolve to try and meet the needs of what they perceive to be important in the Internet of Things, whether it's mesh, Bluetooth, or whether it's IP addressability and technologies that weren't originally offering direct IP addressability. And in what other ways do you think technologies will continue to evolve to try and fight off this increased fragmentation and to gain share within the broader IoT scenario?
I think connectivity and discoverability is one of the key things. We already live in a world where keeping your IT systems running is quite a challenge. Even for people like us who are IT savvy, it's quite difficult. I mentioned the fact that I still haven't quite yet managed to set up my wireless printer so that it consistently works without the boxes need to be turned off every now and again. And that's with somebody who's
glad you're persevering. I gave up on
that's
printing.
And if we're going to have lots more of these devices, we can't live in a world where every 30 minutes you've got to go and turn your box off and on again and reboot everything in order that you can make it work. It has to be very, very simple, and that means you just take a device, you turn it on for the first time. You don't need to type in a password or a code or anything like that. It all has to work, and it has to be discoverable from other places. So the fact this device is there can be discovered by other applications that may be running in the cloud and turned on. So that kind of thing, I think, will prove to be probably more important than the underlying factor, whether it's $1 or $1.50 for the chipset, because frankly, if you get back 10% of your product because people can't make it connect, that's going to blow your price points away anyway. So it really has got to be simple.
But I can also see that I've seen it in I would say, seen technology merge when you have Bluetooth, Wi-Fi combinations, multi-radios, and you can probably embrace 5, 6, 7 as you have a cellular phone today. You have a tremendous amount of radio interfaces, frequencies, standards that you support. I think you will see that also in this area, in the Internet of Things, that you have like a Swiss Army knife where you can put out the new best technology.
Talk to whatever you want.
But eventually it will take a long time to come there.
Picking up on that particularly, Martin, I mean, how much scope is there for a software configurable radio in this environment?
I would say it would be much easier, than the time for the development cycles will be much shorter, and we see that software is getting more and more into everything today, and software is easier to deploy and update and upgrade if new standards comes up, or if there's a change in the regulatory domain in certain areas, you can send out an update over air.
There's some developments happening, isn't there? Because I believe Nordic Semiconductor has been selling a software configurable radio for some time now.
I'm not the right person to comment that, as I with my new role.
It seems like it would be a nice answer to a problem.
Yes,
Actually, I would say.
It seems to me some of the key characteristics of the Internet of Things for it to really take off big time are very low cost and extremely long battery life, or no battery at all. And anything that's either multi-standard or software defined works completely against those grains. First of all, you need more powerful processors and more memory, that's more cost. And then you need much more battery to run systems that are effectively not optimized right from the start. So I think we'll see Internet of Things devices actually going in the opposite direction of being less software defined, having very minimal processors, the smallest possible ARM core or similar, very low power. And actually, the thing to do is, if for whatever reason it really does need an update, you throw it away and get another one, rather than worrying about trying to software reconfigure it over the air.
Okay, well, we're sort of coming towards the point where we're getting to the end of the session now. I think Lisa's going to close off, but I just want to drag you back to the question you all avoided earlier, which was, somebody's got to put a figure on how long it's going to take for this to happen. And I'm just going to go around the table and ask you, you can give us your number, and in 5 years' time we'll look back and say, actually, John was right, or William was right, or Abby was right. So, John, Internet of Things becoming a reality, really ubiquitous. When?
I think it could happen within the next 2 years. I think
2 years.
I actually think it could, and I think it will be driven by some of the big guys that are already playing on the sidelines, if you like. You know, I refer of course to an Apple or a Google. I think they could drive that whole thing. I also believe, has it already started? I believe it has. I think the Internet of Things, from our point of view, we're already doing it. InOcean's well and truly employed in thousands of buildings already. It's out there saving energy.
Okay, thank you. And Peter, from your perspective?
7 to 10 years.
7 to 10 years.
It's like the Game of Thrones out there still. There's a lot of struggles to go, and those kind of struggles go over multiple seasons of any show. So, a good TV show will last for 7 or 8 to 9 years. So I think that's what I'd say.
That's your number.
Nice
okay.
one.
All right, thank you. Good analogy. Right. And how about you?
Okay, I think that we will see in 2-3 years really a pickup, but it will take probably 5 to 10 years, a little bit more, less than that, until
Give
we
yourself
will
a
see
bit
the
broader
real
span.
major that it is here and it is existing.
Okay. And what would an analyst say?
I mean, I would say that it's difficult to think of the Internet of Things as a single entity. I think to some extent we could say that, a lot of it's here today. We've seen massive growth in things like connected healthcare and, from the consumer perspective, sports and fitness and different applications. But there are other applications that are going to take longer. I think it's going to take, another 3-4 years until we've got what some would call a really sizable install base in this area, but it's going to take a few years beyond that to make sure that everybody's really got the business models and the appropriate service solutions that are going to continue to drive that sustained growth. But I don't think I'm ever going to be in a position to say, the Internet of Things is here, it's done, because there's always going to be new applications, new services, new technologies, and new criteria that are going to drive continued growth throughout the future.
Okay, thank you. And William?
So I tend to think of success in the Internet of Things as meaning something like the 50 billion type of numbers that are banded around, which is kind of a nice number because it's roughly 10 devices per person with a mobile phone. So when will we get to a situation where for every one of us there's 10 devices? We may not own them all ourselves, some may be in street lamps and car parking spaces, but in aggregate there's 10 devices per person. And that seems to me to be still some way off. I think we'll see, as Lisa and others have said, a period of the next 3 or 4 years where we get steady growth and we see more and more solutions put out there, mostly in verticals, but we're still a long way away from 10 per person. And then around about the 4-year point, roughly from now, something will happen, the iPhone moment that will catalyse the market, that will bring everything together, and suddenly, in just the same way that mobile data then trended upwards almost exponentially, you will see very rapid growth. And that will then take us quite quickly up to the 50 billion numbers, which I suspect will happen in the 4 to 8 year type of time period.
Okay, all right, thank you. Interesting. Martin, what do you think?
I agree with the 50 billion target, so to say, but if you see where the point before that is when the personal area network, everything around the person, is the number of units are less than in other kind of devices, then I think we have reached the point where you can say Internet of Things has taken over as the driver. And I would say somewhere 2020, somewhere around that. That's my guess. But that's the definition about what is when the Internet of Things...
6 or 7 years, you're saying?
Yes, when it's really, it's just shipping more devices to machines and human beings and things around a human being.
Okay, so our estimates range from 2 years up to 8 or 9 years.
2 years to 11.
It could be sometime.
So sometime along the way.
At least we agree it's happening.
It's something like that.
There is that.
I think the biggest problem is, what is it?
Yeah, well, I think Lisa's now going to take us into blue skies area, aren't you?
I am afraid. So we started off by talking a little bit about what's happened over the last 6 months. But I'd like to just close the session by looking forward a little bit more than that, looking at, say, 5 years from now at the Internet of Things. And I'd like you each to try and describe what you think the landscape would look like as it relates to wireless technology. We seem to have some consensus over here that there's going to be Bluetooth Smart on the rise. We've obviously heard a lot about ULE, Inocean, other technologies. So I'd just like to hear briefly from each of you, what will it look like in 5 years?
We can go the same route round the table. So John, you're on
I'll
again.
start. Yeah. Okay. So 5 years. I think we will carry on with a number of different radio protocols. I hear that there will be sort of some form of coalescence of devices, but I think we'll have more than one radio protocol, and I think radio will be the dominant thing. There won't be wired things. It won't be sort of power line. I think that's where it's going to be going, I think it's going to be premised on the acceptance within the domestic environment at a certain price point. And that's the biggest issue. I think we will see it certainly in the assisted learning space come out very, very quickly. We're already starting to see it, and it's going to grow and grow.
Okay. I think within a couple of years we will continuously know the heart rate of every hipster. One way or another, through their Fitbits and their Google Glass. And in fact, their smartphones will be able to aggregate an average between those and report to all the other hipsters. And we'll be able to see them all peaking at Apple events and things like that. But sort of getting realistic, the things that are going to be happening and interesting in 5 years' time will be municipal applications, will be car parking and street lights and stuff like that.
Okay, all right.
In terms of technologies, I do not see any major shakeup. I believe that the existing technologies will continue and will continue to improve and maybe cover up what are the not so successful sites. I mean, they're just the deficiencies and etc. And basically, hopefully, by that time, we will start to see more of the frictions going away. I mean, that we will learn how to actually make the market move forward even faster. And I do believe that we will see accelerated growth of the Internet of Things and more applications, more and more devices, and more players in the market.
Thanks. Okay, Lisa, you posed the question. Did you want to say anything at this point?
Sure.
Answer your question.
I think that I would disagree with the idea that there's going to be a single technology that does dominate the whole of the Internet of Things. I think we're going to see technologies that are stronger in certain applications and that meet requirements better than others. So, for example, in the sports and fitness element, we've seen Bluetooth Smart with standard growth. In something like the smart home, there's still more to play for in terms of the number of standards that are competing, whether it's Zigbee, ULE, Inocean, Z-Wave, Bluetooth Smart as well. And I think that we're still going to continue to have a scenario where at a node level there are multiple different radios and people have to choose the right device that fits at their solution. But I think that towards that end we're going to see gateways getting smarter so that the consumer has more choice and isn't as tied to a single technology, whether that's through software-defined gateways or whether it's just a case of including multiple discrete chips, as we've seen with some companies today like Revolve supporting a very wide range of different chipsets in their gateway. So I think that we will see still applications where there are better fits with technology, but I think it's going to be the applications that can span multiple verticals, like the smart cities, where even within a single vertical application, you're going to see not only competing technologies, but a good mix of solutions that do complement each other, whether it's a case of using power line and street lighting, having cellular, air quality monitors dotted around a park or whatever it might be. I think we are still going to see not so much the competition, but more a complementary mix of different technologies in those spaces.
William, your view on the landscape in 5 years?
So I think what's going to change significantly is that we will see the emergence of Internet of Things network operators. So we already see Sigfox starting to take that space, and I think over the next 5 years, in every major country there'll be at least one operator that provides almost ubiquitous coverage with a specific technology that handles Internet of Things very well. And that will clearly immediately mop up everything like telematics and asset tracking and all those other kind of things. But I think we'll also discover as well that actually it makes much more sense to connect our Nest thermostat directly to that network than it does to go through a home network, because then everything can be connected straight into the cloud. There can be a central control point that can effectively run whatever software the person decides is needed, that can access and control all these things very directly, very simply, without any need for complicated home hubs and gateways. So I think it's those two stages. First of all, a dedicated national network operator, and then secondly, the realisation that actually a lot of stuff is far better connected via them than via a short range approach.
Okay, thank you. Martin?
It's a challenge to talk last. I would say, I think in 5 years' time, I think there has probably been sorted out some of the winners in this game, for sure. The technology, the radio link technology, the short range or other kind of technologies that would be dominant. But I think the focus at that point will be on personal integrity and security. We will talk about other things around what could happen if this data is manipulated or accessed by other, or do you want it to be accessed? So I think the challenges will be on the protocol side, on the higher level, on the Internet of Things. We move from the radio interface to the protocols, how you share the information and how do you make it anonymous and not publicly available, and who can you trust?
Okay, well, I'm just going to throw one last oddball question in here. Do you think that failing to establish a foothold in the Internet of Things could see any of the players that we see today not with us in 5 years' time?
Yes.
For sure.
And who would they be?
Well, I think so. One we haven't talked much about, but Zigbee.
Yeah.
I think is a technology that its only real focus now is on Internet of Things kind of connectivity. And if it were to fail to establish a foothold, then I think it would lose too much momentum. Whereas I think things like Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, even if they had no role to play in the Internet of Things, will still have a very clear role to play in the way that they do now, and will continue to exist on that basis.
Okay.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with you.
Okay,
Yes.
all right, thanks.
Just because they're not here.
Split up on Zigbee.
That's right.
Yeah, that would make it more interesting.
Yeah, well, we keep trying to get them here. But, well, thank you. I think that kind of wraps us up for now. Another fascinating conversation. I want to thank you all for your time, and to IHS for co-hosting with us again. As far as the Roundtable programme goes, the next time we meet will be in Las Vegas again in January. So I hope to see some of you there. And again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.